Hello and welcome to a new episode of Crazy Buildings. Today we will be talking about the risks and traps to avoid when it comes to renting commercial space in Shanghai. For example, renting office space. And we will be talking about the 5 biggest traps one wants to avoid. So this is going to be an interesting one. Let's go. Now we are on our way to People Square, what many consider to be the center of Shanghai. That is where the first metro line, Shanghai Head Line 1 and Line 2 have their intersection. That's where the People's Government is located, People Square, People's Park, and so on. And we will be visiting Raffles City, Shanghai, a huge office and retail development. And the first trap, the first risk we want to avoid when thinking of commercial real estate is that you rent a building that looks beautiful on the outside, that has a beautiful architecture maybe, but that is poorly managed, poor facility management. And poor facility management has many aspects to it. For example, if the building is a strata tile building that has many different owners for each floor, each unit, then it can be hard for the building to be well managed and well maintained. There are technical sides of building management, the administrative sides, it's about cleanliness, about security, and so on. So a well-managed building, and the building we are visiting, which is Raffles City and is owned by CapitaLand, a Singaporean developer, is a very positive example in this regard. The building is built in 2003, so already a little while ago, but because it is well managed, well maintained, both technically and operationally, tenants like the building, visitors like the building, and it is positioned very well and very successful in the market. We have arrived at Raffles City, Shanghai. We have an office tower with about 45 stories, 45 floors, each floor about 2,500 square meters of gross floor area, nice ceiling heights of about 2.7 meters, so very beautiful, very usable office space. And the second risk you want to avoid when taking up commercial space is an administrative risk, is the risk of not being able to use that space, to use that address to register your company and thereby operate your business legally. And there can be many reasons why that happens. For example, if a space looks quite perfect, however it has a residential zoning, then it is no longer possible to run your business from there. Or if the previous tenant has not deregistered yet, because in China at one point in time only one company can be registered at any given address. So if the previous tenant has not deregistered yet, also the space cannot be used. And sometimes that happens for extended periods of time because maybe the previous tenant is in a bankruptcy situation and therefore cannot deregister, and then the space becomes unusable. And that's something you want to check before you move into a building, before you sign a lease contract, and ideally even before you come to visit a building. Now we're on the 8th floor of the building, and we can see beautiful spaces with ceiling heights of 2.7 meters. And the third risk we want to be talking about is the risk of spoiling or losing good opportunities. And sometimes that happens because one is talking to the wrong people. And often it happens because of the lack of speed. Because if there's a great opportunity, well, then it's a great opportunity also for somebody else. So when one finds something good, one want to be ready to sign an LOI, a letter of intent, pretty quickly, pay an additional deposit, secure the space while it is available so that it is yours for sure. So here we are up on the 50th floor where of course we have a fantastic view, and the fourth risk we want to talk about is a financial risk, the risk of overpaying and the risk of under budgeting. And there are various aspects to that, including, well, that the market is still an intransparent and inefficient one. So you want to make sure you have access to real comms, real comparisons, real data, real information on the market. Another aspect is that in a building like this with about 2,450 square meters of office space on a typical floor plate and an efficiency rate of about 70%, well, each tenant pays about 30% for the public areas. But then there's also a difference between the net area and the carpeted area, because there are still some columns in the building, and those are also eating into your space. You can't really use that space. Yet another aspect is renovation, because we see that the building is pretty much empty, so a tenant has to do its own renovation, and in some buildings there are no whatsoever air conditioning installations, and that is a huge cost factor. Now in most buildings, like in this one, there are basic air conditioning installations, but a tenant has to adjust it to their needs. And often the buildings have nominated vendors, and some buildings have nominated vendors for air conditioning, for fire protection, for curtains, for flooring, and so on, and that can become very pricey. So you want to make sure that you're aware of these kind of things before you even look at a building. And finally, of course, you want to make sure that you have good representation, because there are agents whose mandate is to help the landlord, help the developer rent and sell their space at more expensive rates. And you want to make sure that you have somebody that's really working purely in your interest, helping you to get the space as cheap and as good as possible, knowing the potential risks, knowing everything ahead of time, so that finally you're happy not only with the space you're renting, but you're also happy with how the financial things look. So the fifth and final area relates to technical aspects. Does the building of your choice provide the electricity, the amount of electricity that you need? Does the building provide 24-hour air conditioning, for example, if you have a server room that needs that, or if the building cannot provide it, will the building allow you to install your own air conditioning, and is there a place to put your split unit or whatever may be needed? Do you have a telecom and internet service provider that your company needs, and is that provider available in the building of your choice? These are things you definitely want to make sure before you sign a lease, because if they are not available, then even the most beautiful building may not be suitable to your purposes. And with that, it is time for today's edition of True Story. What happened is we had a client that came to us and said, I need an office in such and such target location. We said, great, we know all the buildings in the area. And we made a mistake because we requested that he sign an appointment letter with us, an exclusive mandate, and we acted before having it signed in writing, because we understood, and maybe that was a misunderstanding on our end, we thought he had verbally committed to working exclusively with us. So what happened is we go out, we tour buildings, and we find a building that he loves that seems to be a perfect fit, and everything looks great, and then the landlord, the owner of that building, says, well, hold on, I think I saw that tenant visiting another building of mine yesterday. And we said, really? That can't be. And we asked the tenant, he said, yeah, well, I thought, more choices might be better. So I looked and we said, yeah, but look, we know that other building as well, and we knew it wouldn't be a good fit for you. That's why we didn't show it to you. So the situation was a little bit embarrassing, but anyways, we thought now we have a great building. And then that landlord said, look guys, if this tenant, if this client doesn't know which service provider he wants to work with, then it means he is somewhat chaotic and disorganized, and he will not be a good tenant for my building. We are not interested, and we rejected the tenant. And that was a very firm and tough stand, and a little bit extreme, because these things are handled differently in different countries, in different markets around the globe. But it was a tough lesson, I think, for that tenant, that he realized he should have chosen first which service provider to work with before touring buildings. It was a lesson for us that we better have our agreements in written, and well, nothing we could do. We had to look for other buildings, so time was wasted, energy was wasted, but eventually we of course found another good building, so the tenant eventually was happy in the new location. But a tough lesson learned for everybody, and that's how it goes. You live and you learn.